ekam aksharam hृदि nirantaram bhasate swayam likhyate katham. हृदय कुहर मध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रं नाहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति। हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जता चलनरूप आत्मनिष्ठो त्वम्। देहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तथ भावशुद्धिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भातः भावयुतः कुतो वरधिय दृष्टात्मनष्टात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं। सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं। Namo Ramana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, we have been meditating on the verses of Sri Dakshinamurthy Stotram. The Sanskrit original is by Adi Shankara Bhagavad-Pada, and the Tamil translation, which we are relying on, is from Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. We have completed the first 3 verses, and we have seen that the whole layout of the 10 verses can be looked at in different ways. In fact, Bhagavan himself has suggested 2 different ways, one early in the 30s, and then Surinagama notes something in the 40s, and that is what we are relying on, that the first 3 verses are about the world, the next 3 verses are on the Jiva, and the 7th, 8th, 9th are on Ishvara, and the 10th verse is on the phalam. In that sense, we are in the fourth verse, or the first of the three verses, which are going to talk of how the jiva itself, when traced to its truth, is Sri Dakshinamurti Swami, the self of all. That will be the import of the next three verses. From our jiva anubhava, the Acharya is going to take us to show that essentially how he showed that the gross world is nothing but the Dakshinamurti Swami, the self of all. He is now going to show that the jiva, when its truth is inquired into, is nothing but the self of all, the Dakshinamurti Swami. That is how we begin. The Sanskrit verse here, the fourth verse is Nanachitra Gadodarasthita Mahadipah Prabhabhaswaram Jnanam Yasyatu Chakshuradhikarana Bahispandate Janamiti Tameva Bhantam Anubhatyat Etat Samastam Jagat Tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye Namayidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. The Tamil translation is Palatulai Kudatul Deepam Paikadir Polyar Jnanam Viழிமுதற் பொறிவாய் பாய்ந்து வெளிசரித் தறிந்தேன் என்ன விளங்கிடும் எவனை சார்ந்து விளங்கும் அவனி யாவும் சலமரு குருவாம் அந்த Dakshinamurti Potri. The usage of the light and the pot within which the light is placed is an analogy used in this verse, which has made it the most often quoted verse from Sri Dakshinamurthy Stotram. That is, because the jiva, whoever is the sadhaka, identifies with the body and how the jnanendriyas function, he is able to identify with this verse most easily. The only problem with the average experience and the experience stated by the verse is that normally we feel that the data comes in from outside through the eyes, but here the jnanam is said to be going outside and seeking as to what are the objects that are found outside. And this is the latest scientific finding also, that the studies about the sense of seeing is now being understood as the science is getting refined, that it is more proactive, that there is something that is going out of the eyes to actively seek and define, because there is really no such form there by itself unless some consciousness and objective knowledge is present a priori. That is where science is headed, but we are not going to go there today. We are going to take this step by step. Palathulai kudatul deepam பாய்கதிர் போல்யார் ஞானம் விழிமுதற் பொறிவாய் பாய்ந்து வெளிசரித் தறிந்தேன் என்ன விளங்கிடும் எவனை சார்ந்து விளங்கும் அவனி யாவும் சலமர் குருவாம் அந்த Dakshinamurti Potri. We begin with the very normal experience we have, and we can see that we go out through the eyes, and because the higher functioning of the mind through the intellect is there, we see that the object does not ask us, but our own like and dislike makes our eyes move from one object to another. Somebody who likes cricket would obviously be glued to the TV set when a cricket match is going on. Somebody who is interested in some other sport or some other kind of activity, when that activity is going on, the eyes, the object doesn't say, it is the like and dislike inside the mind which directs the consciousness to go there and hold that. That is why Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is known to have said that the objects of the world you say are attracting you. It is like saying that you are holding a tree tightly in embrace and saying that the tree is holding you in embrace. The tree never holds you in embrace, it is you who hold the tree in embrace. But what is it that is hands here and how it is held is what is not understood, because the hands of consciousness are the duality of like and dislike that is present in the intellect, which makes us come to the waking state with a directed consciousness, what is called as suttu arivu, the objective consciousness. The like and dislike being already embedded in the intellect drive the senses outward towards those objects. If one is a bit gentle with the eyesight and starts observing where it goes, one will be able to easily see that it is one's own interest that is driving the eyes. The eyes will suddenly move somewhere, and if one is observant of that, one can see that it is the like that is present in the Sukshma Sharira, in the Antakarana, that is driving the senses. But more of that in the third line that we are going to come. But what is this Palatulai Kudam? Palatulai Kudam is obviously the body. The reference of pot and body refers to the the brittle nature of both, that both are susceptible to break down. And the Sanskrit usage by the Acharya is Mahadeepa. Mahadeepa Prabhabhaswaram. And Bhagavan naturally itself doesn't differentiate between Mahadeepa and Deepa. He just says Deepa Pai. Palatulai Kudatul Deepam. He just says Deepam. He doesn't say Mahadeepam. In one sense, that the difference between the two ways of presenting Advaita, at least in this work, where the Acharya differentiates between the Jivatma in and Paramatma in the journey towards the self, and in Bhagavan's teachings, that difference is not there. Bhagavan would always say only as Atma, and that removes the controversy as to whether there are two Atmas. He will just mention Atma, and that comes into the translation also as Palatulai Kudatul Deepam, not Mahadeepam. Paikadir Polyar Jnanam, Yarudaya Jnanam, whose consciousness goes out through these five Jnanendriyas outside and Virimudar Porivai Paindu, through the Jnanendriyas of eye, ear, nose, then skin and taste. These five senses, the consciousness is going out. There is a presentation from the World Science Forum. It's a forum that conducts many discussions between modern scientists. One of the presentations is about the five senses and reality. And very interestingly, each scientist represents one of the senses. Uniformly, what they find is that the senses do not present reality as it is. The senses are a mere approximation by which the limited jiva is able to keep the Jivatva going. There is an experiment which they conduct that is mentioned in that, not in that video, but some other place, but a similar experiment is mentioned in that video also. In that experiment, they they see the lifestyle of flamingo kind of bird, where in its huge beak there is a red spot. In that huge beak there is a red spot, and the observation is that the chicks, the small ones, whenever they are hungry, they all go and peck that red spot, and immediately the mother regurgitates the food that is within her and feeds them. So this is the observation. So they wanted to check whether what kind of knowledge, what kind of arivu is behind this inclination of the child to seek its food. They present a plastic uh, beak of similar structure with similar kind of red color spot, and the children, the chicks, they come and tap it when they are hungry, and immediately they are provided food, provided the fish or the ground food, whatever they take. And this particular kind of one time input, it makes them feel what they were doing with the mother, they start doing with the plastic beak. So what the scientists find is that the whole data about motherliness and all the other things may or may not be present, but definitely a shortcut has been provided where a color is present and a round dot is present, and that much data alone is there, that if you go and tap there, energy for survival will be there. This is not a lone exercise. There are other experiments which are mentioned, that the senses they have found generally are hacks or shortcuts for the limited jiva to continue to maintain its limited life, and proceed to experiment with it, proceed to learn. And that part, the proceed to learn part, is what we add on to that. But naturally, any jiva being limited, being with name and form, obviously tries to find better happiness, and that way the alterations, the improvements in both the sensory nature as well as the conscious nature, that comes about. And we are no different from the other animals. Bhagavan says that the inquiry, the surrender, the vichara, all these are culmination of a search for happiness that the limited consciousness is bound to make. So, Palatulai Kudatul Deepam Paikadir Polyar Jnanam Viழிமுதற் பொறிவாய் பாய்ந்து வெளிசரித்து அறிந்தேன் என்ன. From it goes from outside these senses, and what does it say? It says that I know. I janamiti tameva bhantam. Janamiti, that I know, is what is the uh, way in which the limited consciousness goes out. And Bhagavan says, whenever we go out, we are going out seeking happiness. Now, there is this work called Manasollasa, which is a commentary in Sanskrit through versification on Dakshinamurthy Stotram. And we find the suggestion in those verses that can there be any objective world without this consciousness rising as I know? Without this consciousness rising as I know, can there be anything outside? And it is clear that in our reverse direction, when we take, whenever we are conscious of an object, the object itself may change, or may undergo transformation, or it may go out of the perception. Some other object may come that may go out of perception, or it may change. But still, I am Janamiti is constant, and the objective knowledge comes into play, transforms, changes. The object itself may go, and this can be applied to waking, dream, and deep sleep. which is the summum bonum of the jiva experiences. That all the experiences made by the jiva, whether it is for a day or if you consider the jiva anubhava for eons, it is the same. It is made of waking, dream, deep sleep. When you understand all these three states, then we understand the time is taken out of context, whether it is one time or innumerable amount of times. The jiva and jagat anubhava is completely encompassed in the relationship of the limited consciousness experiencing waking, dream, and deep sleep. That is how Vedanta compresses both the discrete infinite and the discrete unit. one one cycle of waking, dream, and deep sleep, and a million cycles of waking, dream, and deep sleep. It is the same if you understand as the essence, what is behind this. And Janamiti is the experience of the jiva. I know that I had waking state. I know that I had dream. I know that I slept and I slept happily. These three experiences are now taken in the Manasollasa. That how is the sensory experience, that now the objects have been completely worked out, that the objects will not exist, will not shine unless some individual rises and says, I know. Not only we know the object, we know the object's details. We know it's a bottle, we know it's a bottle having mineral water. We know the details of the object also. All this is known by I know. It is preceded by, or the a priori presence of I know has to be there for the object, its existence to be known, its details to be known. This applies not only to the bottle, it applies to the whole of waking state, whole of dream, whole of deep sleep. Now comes how Manasolasa ties, that is, the objects have been taken out of play. The object may be single object, the object may be the whole of waking, dream, and deep sleep. It has now been taken as a dependent variable. On which does it depend? It depends on I know. There seems to be two types of knowledge. One is the sensory knowledge, and one is the knowledge through the antakarana called the mind. And Manasolasa discusses this very clearly. How the Janamiti, the I, using the antakarana of mind and using the gross senses, knows the worldly objects. Now, the worldly objects have been taken out, that they cannot exist, they cannot shine, they cannot have the Satchit unless the Jiva rises and tries to know them going out through the senses. The senses themselves are known to the consciousness just as the objects are known, because you can see through the eyes, you can see that how the ear is there, how the nose is there, how the tongue is there. Then with the mind, we differentiate the differences between the senses. That means the antakarana is able to know the senses and the sensory objects. The sensory objects don't know the senses, and the senses don't know the antakarana. The senses don't have the sensitivity to know the mind. Therefore, it is with the mind with which we come to the senses, and then we go and get entangled. If we go out as there is something real there, we go and get entangled in the objects of the world. Now, the way in which these two are tied up is interestingly put in Manasolasa, that makes it clear to us as to what should be our journey and where are we going to find Dakshinamurthy Swami. The senses tying the antakarana to the world, the senses are referred to in this way, that they are sparks of fire going out and getting in touch with the objects of the world. Suttarivu. Now, objects of the world have been removed, the senses are the key, and the senses are connected to the mind, the antakarana, like the spokes of a wheel are connected to the rim, is the mentioned in Manasollasa. We can get a feel of it. That is the modern day bike you take, that there are 3, 4 huge spokes, not the multiple spokes of the olden day bikes. Just 3, 4 spokes. We have 5 spokes. The 5 spokes connect from the outside world to the Antakarana. But what is the nature of the Antakarana? The Antakarana is laid out like a fishing net. That means the interconnections in the Antakarana are made of finer strands, and that is what makes you go and evaluate the senses. Why do we have 70% usage of the eyes, 20% of the ears, and all the rest of the three put together 10%? It is because the Antakarana, the mind, is so determining the senses, the usage of the senses. Now, the comparison which we have to understand and take in is that the senses by themselves being gross are like spokes of a bike, 5 spokes connecting the rim to the hub. The Antakarana called mind is like the fishing net is the reference. And what are the strands made of? What are the strands of this fishing net made of? They are the nadis. The nadis are the channels through which the thought current it flows. The nadis are the so the Tameva Bantam is now explained practically. How exactly does the eye go out? The eye goes out by having the Antakarana laid out through this fishing net kind of 101 nadis, and those 101 nadis put together make one go through the senses. Now the eye has understood that the sensory objects themselves do not attract me. It is my Antakarana, it is the net result of like and dislike which makes me go out skewedly in the sensory world. So now there is a withdrawal. The jiva is better able to understand where exactly to go to find the light supreme. It definitely cannot be in the sensory objects. It definitely cannot be in the senses, because the senses are used, they arise and they are used based on the way in which the fishing net or the nadis are all now present. What are these nadis and how is the sadhana and how is the refinement in the nadis? The nadis are 101 in all, but then there are 3 which basically determine the spiritual journey of the jiva. The spiritual journey of the jiva towards Sri Dakshinamurthy is done through Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. The Sushumna is supposed to start with the grossest of the chakras and go up to the subtlest Sahasrara. And Bhagavan says, from the Sahasrara, there is a nadi which comes to the Hridayam. Now, this will not be taken as an introduction to the Shad Chakras and the way in which they are laid out. We are going to see that some of the lower chakras relate to gross thoughts, and as you go up, the thoughts become subtler. And what do we find as the relationship between subtle and the gross? So far as subtle energy is there, the subtle is a refined bondage, more stronger bondage, which is adhara for the gross bondage. Now, the Kundalini Shakti is supposed to reside at the base of the 6 chakras, and the 7th one being Sahasrara. As we move up in sadhana, the energies or the thought energies with which we have to deal with become subtler and subtler, and one goes up from the various nadis, anahata, then finally the sushumna is there, where the 1,000-petaled lotus is said to exist. For us, for this verse, it would be sufficient if we can understand that these are more subtler. The nadis are subtler than the senses, but there are various gross levels and subtle levels. One can have the average existence in one of these levels, slip up, go, and all these are possible. And that journey of coming down and going up is made by three nadis called Sushumna and the other two being Ida and Pingala. One can say that the Sushumna is free of dualities. When one inquires oneself free of the dualities of like and dislike, then one travels up in the Sushumna. So far as the duality of like and dislike is there, one travels in Ida and Pingala. And so far as the like and dislike duality is there at any level, one is said to come back to this plane of existence, then work one's way through. But once one learns the art of going through the Sushumna beyond the dualities, then one is said to go through the path of light, where one resides in Mukti Loka till one goes beyond this Loka dimensions. That is the journey of the Jiva. So the Jiva is Tameva Bantam, but what it does, it gets struck in various grades of energy flows in the body through these nadis, goes up and comes down through the chakras, and it now has now understood that when I go through the senses, it is like the spokes of the wheel. I am going to be in the gross. It is my own subtle bondage that is going to make me reliant there. So I have withdrawn from the sensory objects and the senses. So now we come to the individual. The individual, when he is still having likes and dislikes, and with that he comes into the waking state with the senses, then he is said to be bound in the waking state. But when he understands that it is me who is now tying myself to the gross and is withdrawing from the senses and sensory objects, then we come to the area of thoughts. The jiva is able to come to the area of thoughts. This is conscious dream, or this is swapna, where one is conscious that the moment I take the reality of senses and go through them, I am binding myself to the waking state. So one converts the waking state into dream here itself. And this is where Bhagavan says, treat the world like a dream. Detach yourself, deal with the relationships in the waking state like a dream. Then the grossness with which we come to those relationships will come down. We will be able to perceive as to how our consciousness is trapping itself where it need not. So therefore, one comes from, by disengaging from the senses, one comes from the waking state, makes the waking state itself into a dream. And when in Atma Vicharam, we let go of the thoughts, then we come to Sushupti. We come to Sushupti where the dream thoughts, the dream feelings, the dream objects are all now turned inward from, because the gross thoughts, the thoughts regarding not so gross connections, and the abstract thoughts of the intellect, all these are bondages to the various chakras. And Bhagavan teaches us that the wherever the chakras you may reside in, the I thought is always centered in the heart, is always centered in the Hridayam. This Hridayam is different from the Hridaya chakra in the chakras stage. This the spiritual heart, the source from which the Sahasrara connection also comes. The Sahasrara also has to end in the heart. So when Bhagavan teaches us, who am I, whatever may be our average stage of existence in the six chakras, it doesn't matter. We are always going to go back to the heart. Bhagavan says, whatever may be your average existence. If you ask who am I, you are going to Hridayam. You are going to go beyond the chakras. So what we understand is that from waking, we come to conscious dream. And in conscious dream, when we don't go by the various chakra-based thoughts, the gross thoughts, subtle thoughts, good thoughts, bad thoughts, as well as the abstract thoughts, which understands the connection between all these, when we don't differentiate between them and keep going to the who am I, we are going to Sushupti. That is why it is called as Jagrat Sushupti, going to Sushupti consciously. And that is where we meet the Spurana, we meet the I, and that is Ishwaratva. The getting in touch with the I, the Jiva, when it understands that holding the I, now the three states are understood to be merely passing show. They are merely passing before my eyes. I am not seeking any of them. I understand that this Purana alone is reality. Then one identifies with Ishvara. It is not that one becomes anything, one changes anything in this stage. It is that one understands that the Ishvara has always been there. This Purana has always been there. And this is where the third line comes. Tameva bhantam anubhati etat samastam jagat. All the worlds which can be seen as combinations of waking dream and deep sleep and turiya, there is this theory that there are 256 worlds, all a combination of these four states: waking, dream, deep sleep, and turiya. 4 into 4, 16, 16 into 16, 256 worlds are said to be there, made of different combinations of these. For instance, the sages, like when Bhagavan as Guru appears in the dream of someone, they are in that, they are said to be in that. This is all Dvaita Marga, and we had gone into this research in one of our seminars. That in that they have these 256 dimensions. In the dimension where Turiya is the most, and the other three, waking, dream, and deep sleep, are merely Namkavaste. That is where the great divine entities are said to reside. They have the ability, they are awake where we are asleep. So they have the ability to instruct us when our ego is most obedient. When is our ego most obedient? When it is in deep sleep. So that is why it is told by Bhagavan to Kunjaswami, before going to sleep, do self-enquiry. You ask of the possibility from the higher one that let the higher one lead me in my enquiry. In deep sleep, that higher power helps you conduct the enquiry, and you wake up. The first thought is of enquiry only. What thought you go as the last thought before sleep, that is the first thought with which you get up. But we are inquiring how the I, the Jiva, the Janamiti has come to such a Janamiti that it has not only kept itself from inward, the inward journey of turning inward from the sensory objects, senses to the thoughts, thoughts to the self. Now it has come to this Purana, which is the Ishvara. And it identifies that this is my reality. This has always been my reality. That all that has never been my reality, because they are not real at all. The moment you come in touch with Spurana, you understand all the entities of waking state, all the entities of dream, deep sleep are dependent and have only dependent existence. Dependent on what? Dependent on this Purana. That is the Tameva Bhantam Anubhati. That is Vilangidumiv Evanai Sarnd Vilangumiv Avani Yavum. First two lines, we find the Jiva is still there. That the Jiva has gone through the senses. Palatulai Kudatul Deepam Paikadir Polyar Jnanam Velisari Tarinde. Now it has now withdrawn from the sensory objects, come to the subtle thoughts, understood that the journey between the Sushumna as you go through the chakras to the Sahasrara and to the Hridayam, and it understands that the subtle The connections are like a fishing net, are closely interwoven, and this is what is driving the eyes are driven by the likes and dislike in the inner connection. So the antakarana is now, what are my likes and dislikes? Unless you do self-inquiry, how will you know? Oh, this is the thought that is directing my eyes towards that. As the thoughts come up, the jiva is able to understand, and is not only able to let go of thoughts, it is able to let go of all the three states. And that is where Dakshinamurthy Swami gives us darshana as this Purana. Tameva bhantam anubhati etat samastam jagat. So that anubhati, that shining one, is definitely not the one who was struck with the senses, is definitely not the one who is exploring what is the bondage I am having. Why is it that I am so struck in this world? Crossed waking dream and deep sleep, and is now identified with Sri Dakshinamurthy Swami himself as the I. That is where, in the last verse that we are going to see, the Falastuti, it is going to be said that one will be blessed with Ishwaratva. What is this Ishwaratva? That is where some of the sadhakas may have some doubt that now I will be able to reconstruct the world as I want. And that was a dialogue I had with an IITian. The IITian had gone to a guru, and there was a lot of difficulties, and we had a meeting. The meeting was arranged, and we came up to the point where there was commonality of the understanding about the senses, understanding about the mind, were all together we were moving. But once the Ishwaratva came, once the understanding that one is going to identify with Ishwaratva, he felt that now that Ishwaratva will allow you to reconstruct the world into a more comfortable world as you want in the sensory area. That you will have the better ashram, you will have more number of devotees, you will go in whatever. Unknowingly, what happens, that the vasana regarding the sensory world has not been completely eliminated. So this Ishwaratva doesn't mean that now we will be asking for the better mobile. One has to understand that Ishwaratva there is now to come to the self. As Bhagavan says, that once you come to the Ishwaratva, hold on to him and be quiet, he says. Don't ask anything of him. The moment you ask anything of him, or if you have a construct like this, that with that Ishwaratva, I am going to have a bigger ashram and more number of devotees, or whatever, you are going to come back to the bondage. It only means that you haven't worked out that and gone back, that there is some meaning in the sensory bodies, that the sensory bodies have to be aggregated as subtle bodies, the subtle bodies have to be integrated into one, and that one has to be taken to silence. So the Ishwaratva, and also it gives you many siddhis. The siddhis are all included in the self. If one has still some inclination towards siddhi or using Ishwaratva, you will be used by Ishwaratva. if we still have the feeling that we are, forget about Ishwaratva. If you feel that anybody is useful, he is going to be used by you, that you are going to use anyone, then you will be used. This is the rule. The rule is that, and this has been found by even Western philosophers like Immanuel Kant. He says, never treat a human being merely as a means to an end. Always understand they are ends in themselves. Unless you understand that each one is permeated by Ishvara, you will never come anywhere near Ishwaratva. Unless we understand that the whole creation is permeated by Ishvara, this Purana will not reveal itself to us. Unless we understand that everybody is Dakshinamurthy Swami, one will not be able to abide in oneself being Dakshinamurthy Swami. This is the rule. If you treat any one person, we see Adi Shankara meeting the Chandala, and you all know the episode that if there is an ill treatment of one, then that one will rise and say, I am Dakshinamurthy Swami. How did you treat me like this? Therefore, any outward distinction between one being and another will block one from turning inward. Forget about being abiding in this Purana. So this definitely means that the gross is assimilated into the subtle is assimilated into the no object state. The no object state of deep sleep is assimilated into the self-luminous self. That is why Bhagwan in Ulladu Narpadu says that Ulaginukku Adharamai Uruvatraru Unarndaru Unmai. That this Purana, this shining Tameva Bhantam, is by itself, it is self-luminous and it is beyond names and forms. Now reverse, now go back into the verse that it is this self which is Dakshinamurthy Swami, which has taken out of kindness the form of Adi Shankara, and which has taken the form of Sri Dakshinamurthy Swami, which has taken the form of Ramana Maharishi, which is in reality this Purana alone. It is that to which our obeisance is. That you are never the Jiva. No one is the Jiva. You find that your child is in trouble. Your one of the closest ones is in deep trouble and doesn't know what to do. What is the way to understand the whole scenario? The whole scenario is understood by turning from the gross to the subtle and subtle to the light. Be the light. You understand that person is not the gross body. That person is not the mind which appears to have got itself into trouble. Who is that person? That person is no other than Sri Dakshinamurthy Swami himself. Be there. This is what the Bhakti Marga also requires of you. What does Bhakti Marga require of us? Bhakti Marga requires that we have complete faith in the deity we are worshipping. Now, if you still have doubt that the one who is relying on you is in trouble, is that faith? Can we call that we are having faith towards the deity or the guru whom we are worshipping? Obviously not. So the jnana is the practical implementation of bhakti, practical implementation of surrender. The other day, one practitioner of self-enquiry was saying, nowadays I am getting lots and lots of surrender in the outside world, that I am able to turn inward. He's telling in reverse that I'm able to turn inward from the sensory objects, turn inward from the thought. That is what surrender implies, isn't it? And he asked me, what is the relationship between my surrender and the self-enquiry? And we came to the point that self-enquiry is nothing but practice of surrender. Someone may say that he is practicing surrender. May not be. Occasionally, when trouble comes, you remember God and let that particular trouble, let it not come. But in self-enquiry, it is laboratory practice of surrender. Any thought comes, you are not to pursue that with more thoughts. You have to let it go. Then alone, the jiva is available for surrender to the real light. So self-enquiry is nothing but practice of surrender. Where does it take us? The one whom you consider to be in trouble, the reality is that that one and the one who is concerned are nothing but this Purana. The other three, waking, dream, and deep sleep, are unreal. One has to abide in this to understand the whole, that it is only Sri Dakshinamurthy Swami by the Antakarana split himself as many and appearing as all the relatives that we see, all the friends that we see. And in our inner journey, the reverse engineering is that the many become subtle, subtle becomes one, and one becomes the Tameva Bhantam, the Spurana, the self-luminous self, the Ulaginukku Adharamai Uruvatrarum Unmai. The beauty in those two verses, in another satsang we were saying, there were two verses, the 17th and 18th, if I am not wrong, that one says, Udal Nane Tannai Unararkum Unarndarkum. See, the Jiva Bhava comes from being identified with the gross body. Udal Nane Tannai Unarndarkum Unararkum. Udal Alave Nan Tan Unarark. This body becomes the limit for our identity, where we don't experience the Spurana within. உடல் உள்ளே தன்னுணர்ந்தார்க்கு. Within the body, the one who has identified with the self, the Dakshinamurthy Swami, எல்லையற, all limits are off. All limits like waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state are off. One is the independent self-luminous self. எல்லையற தானொளிரும் நான். And the next one, உலகுண்மையாகும் உணர்வில்லார்க்கும் உள்ளார்க்கும் உலகளவாம் உண்மை உணரார்க்கு உலகினுக்கு ஆதாரமாய் உருவற்றாரும் உணர்ந்தார் உண்மை ஈதாகும் பேதமிவர்க்கென். There, எல்லையறத்தான் ஒளிரும் is the reference to this Purana. Here, உருவற்று ஆறும் உணர்ந்தார் உண்மை. The உருவற்று ஆறும் seems to be negative, that the world names and forms suddenly becomes nothing. But what is important there? What is important is that the self is self-luminous and it consumes everything. உருவற்று ஆறும் உணர்ந்தார் உண்மை. To reach that, all one has to do is to free oneself from one's own upadhis. You don't need to worry about what happens to all the names and forms outside. If you keep these specks down, the specks of gross body, the specks of subtle body, and the specks of the eye thought you keep down, then there is this Purana, which is எல்லையறத்தான் ஒளிரும் நான் or உருவற்றாரும் உணர்ந்தார் உண்மை. That is Dakshinamurthy Swami. And it is that Dakshinamurthy Swami who becomes the Jiva, who appears to become the Jiva, tied by the Antakarana with silken threads and tied by the spokes of the senses, and ties himself down in the world, apparently never really getting tied down, in reality remaining ever free as the Atmaswarupa, which alone you are. How else can it be? When there is the truth, what else can be the truth of the Jiva? It is always that Spurana on the shining of which everything else shines, and which can never be lit up by the other lights like sun, tube light, Agni, or anything, because they can never touch the consciousness, whereas they are all the other lights, all the other worlds are visible because of this Purana shining as I. Therefore, Dakshinamurthy Swami alone is, nothing else exists to bind him or to limit him with names and forms. And that is where Atma Vichara takes us. For the next few minutes till 8 o'clock, let us practice this 3 lines of this verse. Then we'll be realizing that this is what Tasmai Sri Guru Murtaye Namayidam Sri Dakshinamurtiye. This is the practice of surrender to Dakshinamurthy Swami. That whenever a thought comes, do not pursue it, because it is a silken thread which ties you to the gross thread as well as to the gross objects. So at the silken thread itself, cut it. It is the very silken thread approach which frees you of that which is not approachable. Vasanas are not directly perceivable, but vasanas, on the heat of tapas, the vasanas raises thoughts. Cut those silken threads, and Sri Dakshinamurthy Swami is bound to give darshana. Adi Shankara is bound. They are the ones who are calling you to the self. It is Adi Shankara and Dakshinamurthy who are calling us to self-enquiry. How else will it be that they don't give darshana? One has to efface oneself. One has to dismantle the ego. There, one realizes, oh, this is the Sannidhi that has called me. This is the Sannidhi that is absorbing me. It is Sri Dakshinamurthy Swami as this Purana that has absorbed me and all the objects I was running after. And the practice of self-enquiry is nothing but a call of this Purana for the limited Jiva to stop all suffering, to stop all objectification, and be one with the Adi Shankara, with Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, with Dakshinamurthy Swami, who are all not other than that Purana, which is the self of all. Let us sit in Atma Vicharam till 8 o'clock. We will request Ujjwal ji to set the time for us. Thank you, sir.
Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. It's a very beautiful journey which Nandakumar ji is taking us through with the verses of Dakshinamurthy Stotram. And today we went through the process and also the concepts which are mentioned in Ramana Gita, the process of what he called reverse engineering. What is mentioned is the way the mind or the consciousness goes outward. It is getting divided. But the emphasis which Nandakumar ji has brought to us is that it is because of this light that everything is known. So what is it? It appears as if it is divided when it goes outwards through the senses. It appears as if it is multiple. The consciousness is divided into hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, etc. And he gave us examples of how none of these senses are to be believed. And we have an old story, that story of how a lady was bringing up a mongoose and she left it and went away. She had a baby in the cradle, and that a snake came into the house. The mongoose fought with the snake, killed the snake, somehow putting its own life into danger. But when the lady came back, she saw blood on the in the mouth of the mongoose, and thinking that the mongoose had hurt her child, she killed the mongoose. So this is a story which we have heard when we were young, and it's also been brought out in a Kannada movie. So never believe what your eyes see. Simply don't believe what your eyes see. Simply don't believe what your ears hear. Because so many perspectives are there. Even if you inquire, the concept is inquire deeply, even in the sensory world. Inquire deeply before believing something to be the truth. Because there are so many perspectives. Even if you inquire deeply, then we were brought to the senses appear to be the culprit of dividing our consciousness. But deeper down, what is it that is dividing the consciousness? We were brought to the intellect, which says likes and dislikes. So when there are likes and dislikes, the senses will only obey what the intellect is saying. So everything gets divided into positive and negative. So we have to transcend that as well. So when we get back to the light, which is getting, maybe it goes through the various nadis, then it goes to the sahasrara, then it comes back to the rest of the body. Then in Ramana Gita, Bhagavan says, because of this light of consciousness which is pervading the body, what does the man think? He thinks, I am conscious, and therefore he begins to act. So the path is reverse engineering. Get back, get back. The senses are not to be trusted. Then what is it to be trusted? Can we trust the waking intellect? No, even that cannot be trusted, because it has got its own world, it has got its own subtle world which is powered by various vasanas. So, Bhagwan is giving us the beautiful, the absolutely, we cannot say unparalleled way of getting to the source, getting back from this dualities and trinities, because they are all dependent on this I thought. So bringing it back from the multiplicity to that single I thought, questioning by questioning, no matter what the thought is, whether the thought has arisen through a sense perception or whether the thought has arisen through a pure intellectual tendency. Thought is thought, says Bhagavan. So that is the great advantage which Bhagavan gives us, and we do not end up condemning sense experience, or we do not end up condemning one particular experience as worse than another experience, because there again we will get caught. Nandakumarji keeps telling us this in different contexts. And he had also told us that in the previous satsang, I think, or it may be one satsang before that, I don't remember exactly. The beauty is that every object, whether it's a gross object or a subtle object, because it carries the light of consciousness, it seems to tell us, I am true, I am true. However, that consciousness which knows, that consciousness is the consciousness which should be held on to, rather than the consciousness which is in the object, which says, oh yes, this is truth, this is truth, this is truth. So long as we are getting caught in anything, any object, saying this is true, or even saying that it is false, because we cannot say something is false except relatively. If we are focusing on something in a relative manner, we will be actually engaged only with an object. So the attention has to be taken back to the source. As Bhagavan says again in Ullanarpada, he says, because we see the world, there seems to be a great power. Even to say there is a power, even to say there is a seeing power. How does that statement come, that there is a seeing power, that there is a seeing light? It is because there is a seen. It is because we accept there is a seen that we say there is a seeing power. So even that is questioned. Bhagavan says, Chittiramum, Parpanum, Sherpadamum, Aroliyum, Attanayum, Tanam, Avan. Everything there is nothing apart. Even that which is seen, or that which is seeing, the process, everything is only that Shakti. Everything is only that Achala, that Chalanamatra, that unmoving Dakshinamurthy, that self, which has no movement because there is no division. As long as there is any form of division, these are beautiful examples which are being given to us. We are being told that if you are seeing something, there must be a seer, so that the attention can turn back to the seer, so that we know that as long as there is any perception whatsoever in any form, which, as Nandakumarji tells us, that right up till the point of the Spurana, right up till the point of the Spurana, even if there is awareness of that movement of the Spurana, that too has to subside. Ultimately, that too has to subside. So everything, it does not mean that it is only when we see gross things that the identity is functional. It means that any perception, because again in Ulladhanarpada, Bhagavan says that the very existence of the body means there are senses. The very existence of a body awareness. Or we can put it reverse. We can say if there is anything that is experienced, there is a body. That is why something can be experienced. This is for me. This is my experience. That happens when there is a limitation, a boundary, an identity. So that has to be questioned by remembering that other things are not important. See, why is this example given? Why is it reiterated to us that the light alone is significant? Because we may tend to give significance to so A object or B object, positive, negative, anything. We do not know with what we get caught, but we may get caught with any object at a given point of time. So when we remember that every perception is only like light passing through the holes of a clay pot, everything is only a small, tiny, it's not the light, it's just a small ray of light which is passing and giving us a very limited perspective. Even the best of perceptions. So, this is important for us to hold on to, which is what self inquiry gives us. It does not discriminate between one perception and another. That is the great gift that self inquiry gives us. Every perception, everything is questioned, everything is put to the test of inquiry. In everything, I will realize, oh, if I am experiencing this, if I am saying this, if I am feeling this is the light passing through a hole. It is not the light itself. And there is only the light, is also another way of coming to the same thing, which is what he says is a great bhakti. The great bhakti says that there is only this light, which happens in Vinsamai. When we get back to the source, then everything is only the source. There is no question, there is no questioner, there is no thought which is apart from the self. But by questioning alone can we abide without any sense of duality. All duality can be erased by questioning alone, by questioning for whom and who am I. Or, of course, when we get back to the source also, when some I also. But the point is that it holds on to the I thought until its this absolute dissolution. That is the strength of inquiry with which we are blessed, and we are doubly blessed that Nandakumar ji reiterates this for us in such a simple manner that who can say one cannot understand the path of self-inquiry and its practice. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Thank you.
Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana to all.